Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. It is 6:01. Welcome to April 23rd, 24, Preston County Board of Education meeting. After a brief moment of silence, Ms. Feathers, our Vice President, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I found my seats in the middle again versus a bunch of standers.
There are some seats in the middle if anybody wants them. Just so you know, just telling you. Just an offer. Before we get into the next part, just take a real quick second. We lost another long-time employee, Mr. Neil Clarkson, who was a custodian at Rollsburg. And again, we try to, hopefully I never miss anybody, but we appreciate the service that they've done. So, with that said, next, at this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Ziegler. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda is the recognitions. At this time, Mr. Martin.
Okay, it's with great pleasure. Obviously, we love to have a big crowd tonight, particularly when it's for student recognitions. We always love that. We have two groups that will be recognized tonight, Mr. Huggins. First, we're going to recognize our West Virginia State Social Studies Fair winners and qualifiers. Of course, if they qualify, they are certainly winners as well. We are also going to recognize all of our first place individuals in the County Young Writers Competition. So to begin, I'm going to ask Mrs. Ziegler, along with her assistants Karen Boyle and Linda Newcomb, to please come forward to recognize the students. This will be Social Studies Fair. We'll have Mrs. Silcock come up for Young Writers.
All right, again, thank you for allowing us to have the Social Studies Fair and supporting us all through the years. Of course, Preston County absolutely did wonderful this year. We had 6 first place, 2 second, 5 thirds, and 1 honorable mention. So we did very well. Very honored to be with such a great group of students behind me. I mean, they absolutely made Preston County proud. So I'd like to honor Bentley Dalton and Bailey Hayes, first place. And Kinsley Dixon, first place. All right. Lane Graham
Kinsley, come on.
and Carter Gardner.
Right there.
Addison Plum and Abby Metz, first place. Grace Eastep, first place. Molly Hoffman and Maya Zinn, first place.
She did.
Yes. All right, second place, Taryn Sullivan. Second place, Zachary McNair. place, Jathan Arnold. And third place, Desiree Newland. All right, and we have an honorable mention, Cadence Fairs. I have Desiree's. There two?
Apparently.
Oh, okay. Okay, Cadence Fairs. Cadence Fairs. Yep, and honorable mention, Sarah Dew. And there is more. There it is. Where's Mark? Okay, those are our social studies state winners. Everybody, you want some of that?
Keep them set up, I want to get a picture as well, if that's possible.
How about Grace? Desiree, move up. Yes. C. There you go. How about Mark? Let's get closer together. Get closer in there. All right, everybody show your certificates, pictures, hold it on both sides. You got them in order? There you go.
Squeeze, guys. Squeeze just a little. Okay, look at me. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Jacob, congratulations. 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 Congratulations.
Okay, yeah, we're done. What's we got? Again, congratulations, social studies winners. Thank you, Ms. Zigray, for all your work. Appreciate it. Okay, next on the agenda will be
The Young Riders.
Young Riders. So, Mr. Martin, Young Riders.
Again, Mr. Huggins, we want to certainly recognize the accomplishments of our students in the Young Riders competition. County coordinators are Debbie Zigray and Tina Silcott. I do want to call to attention, Brian Bailey is very involved in this competition as well with the Preston County Reading Council. But we want to recognize the kids. They do a great job, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Mrs. Zigray and Mrs. Silcott to please come forward to go ahead and recognize students participating in the County Young Riders competition.
Before I start, I know the coaches have asked for a pay raise. I like to have a pay raise too. Because we go to regionals and states. No, Brad, you're supposed to be loud. All right. All right. The Preston County Young Writers, we're honored. We have some first place winners that will be going to the state Young Writers contest. Is it what, May the 3rd? May the 3rd at the University of Charleston. And then they'll find out if they place first in the state fair if they're in attendance. So, again, I'm honored with the students behind us. They've been writing in class and everything, and kudos to the teachers that have helped their students to teach writing in the classroom. And I'm sure it all started with Miss Vanessa Hayes back here. She's still there with her writing and everything that she imposes on us to teach in class. All right, so we have a first and second grade competing against each other, and we have Brenna McCoy from Kingwood Elementary is our first place prose winner, who will be attending the States. Is she here?
She's there.
And then we have third and fourth grade, they compete against each other. We have Kyle White, who will be attending States too. He's from Kingwood Elementary also. And then our fifth and sixth grade prose entry that will be competing as States is Milo Zinn from Central Preston.
Is Hannah Hunt there?
And then we have our poetry contest. Now, we do that in the county in honor of Mary Agnes Workman also, but they do not go on to state competition. So our first and second place, first place in third and fourth grade poetry, we do not have first and second grade poetry, is Hannah Hunt from Preston. And then we have a fifth and sixth grade poetry, first place in our county, goes to Stella Mae Kozak McDaniel from Rollsburg. So those are the elementary winners. Now I'll turn middle school and high school over to Ms. Silcott.
I'm so excited to be here. I am the coordinator for 7th through 12th grade, and the following students were first place winners in both poetry and prose. In 7th and 8th grade poetry, we have Marin Shrout from Central Preston Middle School. Seventh and 8th grade prose goes to Jordan Eden from Brewston School. Ninth and 10th grade poetry goes to Charlie Pettit at Preston High School. Ninth and 10th grade prose goes to Justina Plum, Preston High School. Eleventh and 12th grade poetry goes to Emily Bucklew, Preston High School. And 11th and 12th grade prose goes to Taryn Veltry, Preston High School. And I also want to acknowledge last year Taryn Veltry was also for 9th and 10th grade. No, excuse me, 11th and 12th grade, and she won first place in the state last year.
No one has to tell them.
Congratulations, you guys are all leaving. That'd be a first. That'd be a first. Ms. Zegray and Ms. Silcott, thank you again as they're leaving. We're waiting on Mr. Martin to
on.
double check something.
It's on.
Okay, appreciate everything and all the kids,
Thank you.
so.
We'll fix it on the backside.
Ms. Zegray, we can probably between us find a penny for a pay raise.
You're lucky. You're lucky. This meeting's going to go to 11 o'clock.
All because of her.
Clear room.
Okay, Mr. McCrum. Next is delegations. He signed up, so. We have no official, Mr. McCrum?
He's talking.
I know. Just see if he needs to talk.
Just for the record, I maybe get accused of talking the most, but you two are the only ones that have talked, and you've cleared the room.
Okay, moving on then. Mr. McCrum does not want to speak. Next on the agenda are the presentations, which are none. Next will be minutes. At this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the minutes from 4/8/24 board meeting.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Zegray. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open.
Okay. Please, thank you. That way I don't mess them up again.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Okay. Board members, in your packets, you should have received a weekly notification to the superintendent's update, and I'll give a brief report as well, and then field any questions. Obviously, on our schedule of weekly events, yesterday, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to stay off the weekly events because I'll cover that in my section here momentarily. I would say next week, though, we will jump into our fourth and final quarterly data meetings with each of our schools. That'll start on April 29th and will proceed through April 3rd. Typically, we can get 1 or 2 meetings done per day. We provide feedback documents to the schools each quarter. And we set and establish like a talking agenda at the principals meeting in advance of these meetings. Did want to call to attention, we had the Buckwheat Festival Royalty Pageant. While Preston County Schools doesn't sponsor the event, you know, we had the royalty, I don't know what we call them, the Royalty Court was named at the pageant this past Saturday. We had 6 outstanding students who were recognized. The first runner-up for Queen Series, or the first maid of honor was Ella Cease, with the first runner-up to King Buckwheat, William Estep. Queen Series of 2024 will be Julia Phillips. King Buckwheat will be Connor Gibson. And the second maid of honor was Olivia Coombs. And second runner-up to King Buckwheat is Caden Hayes. We certainly appreciate the Kingwood Volunteer Fire Department for helping to sponsor the Preston County Buckwheat Festival and recognize these outstanding students. We have put out a summer PD survey for professional staff that we released on Monday of this week. This helps kind of guide our PD for both the summer and in year next year as we try to build out our professional development schedule. We provided with an iReady update. I did want to note that we do have all of our nominees named for the Teacher Service and Coach of the Year. They will be recognized. We're just pulling pictures at this time, and all of the nominees will be recognized on our website and Facebook site. Again, we will likely be naming these folks early May, and board members, I'll make sure we're good to bring you guys along for the ride who would like to attend and recognize our outstanding teacher, service person, and coach. We continue to receive applications for the governor's school. Mr. Tatham, I know the one in the tourism, I believe we have 3 prospective students for that one, but we're continuing to take applications, and we'll get those submitted within the prescribed timelines. I did want to call to attention the Preston County Schools Levy Committee will be hosting an educational forum with a question and answer session. Along with, it will also provide an opportunity for Board of Education candidates to speak about their platform items. This event will take place on Monday, April 29th at the Kingwood Community Building. Doors will open at 5:15 and the forum will start at 6 p.m. It will be broadcast by Mountain Digital, Hometown TV, and the committee is very excited about the opportunity to obviously speak to the public about the levy proposal that is being put forth, and also give an opportunity for our Board of Education members to speak to the general public. Not that these other forums are not certainly informative, but there's just so many people involved. We thought this is a more focused approach, and we'll give an opportunity for people, if they have questions, particularly about educational items, to be able to put forth those questions. We've also provided just our annual April wellness activity. And we have a significant event coming up on May 2nd. We're working in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce and the Preston County Economic Development Authority in regards to, we're going to be hosting a student and community career fair here at Preston High School. That event will be taking place on May 2nd from 10 to 2 p.m. Very excited about that. I know Mr. Seymour, Mr. Justice are working to line up prospective businesses and working in conjunction with the Chamber and with the EDA as well. So we're very excited about that. To jump into my report, I did want to indicate that today I was able to attend really an enjoyable event. Preston High School hosted their annual military and college signing day in the Media Center at Preston High School. This gave military recruiters and college representatives were on hand to have students sign off on their commitment letters, either to the military or their college or technical school of choice. There were a lot of parents, particularly in the afternoon session. There was hardly a place to stand in our media center. So a great event. Mr. Seymour, thank you and your staff for helping to organize that for the students. I thought that was great. Mrs. Ryan was in attendance, and my understanding, she'll make sure she gets some photos and a story up on our website as well. So kudos to Preston High for a great event today. As we've already mentioned, the Levy Committee Educational Forum that's going to be taking place on the 29th. Colson, I know, or Board Member Manco, we have made some level of progress on the ceiling tiles at Preston High School. They've been replaced both in the classrooms and in the hallways, in the 9th grade wing upstairs, and the fine arts wing. We'll obviously continue to address that issue throughout the course of the spring. Mr. Murray confirmed today that Veritas has completed the interior work at the West Preston concession stand and pod classroom door project. Walkthrough and punch-out list will have to be carried out before obviously closing out the project. Stone Paving is working on the asphalt and concrete work over the next 2 weeks, but we're very hopeful to have everything wrapped here by the middle of May on that project. Very excited about that. Preston High School secure entryway and exterior door project now has a substantial completion date. For the entire project is set in early July. However, the project extension exists out to October. To give sufficient time, that has been requested and approved by the School Building Authority. At this point, they are working on the front entryway. I know we had vendors up last week in terms of electronic specialty was up to start reinstating the key access system on the back concourse and eventually the front. And then as the exterior doors were being replaced, those will actually be accompanied by new card readers at each of the doors in which we're putting card readers in place. Last week I was notified by this is great news, and I was told I could put this out publicly. Last week, I was notified by the West Virginia School Building Authority, the director, Mr. Andy Neptune, that my presence is requested in Charleston at the West Virginia Department of Education offices at Building 6 on May 8th at 11:45 in regard to a submitted major improvement project request at Kingwood Elementary. Obviously, this is pending board approval, but the project involves the development of a secure entry vestibule at Kingwood Elementary and will replace all exterior doors in association with the project. There is pending approval on the project, but Mr. Neptune did indicate I could put this out publicly at this juncture, that it is pending approval, of course. But if the project is approved, it will be, we will be receiving $586,220.90 from the School Building Authority towards the project. That is in conjunction with Preston County Schools will be putting forth a 35% match at $315,657. Thrasher Engineering assisted with the project, but this is a great example of how our levy dollars can help us to garner funding from the state. We've done this with a number of projects, and this is just yet another example of a project that we're going to be able to kick off this year, primarily as a result of the support of the voters of Preston County with the school levy 5 years ago. So really excited about that, and obviously May 8th, we're very excited to hopefully see the approval of this project. I did want to update the board on the PHS Theater renovation project, which has also primarily been levy funded. Removal of the existing seating took place back in February. The electric crew has been in working on the lighting upgrades. They are wrapping up. I believe they should be finished by Thursday. Our maintenance crew will be replacing approximately 30 ceiling tile that had to be taken down with the lighting project. They will also be painting the floor upon the departure of the lighting crew. Mr. Murray indicated he's hopeful to do that on Thursday and Friday of this week. Get fans on, allow that to properly dry, and then the seating company will be coming in to install the seats next week. Once that is complete, then we have we have a contract with Delano's to come in and replace the carpets within the lower theater, but there was also substantial water damage upstairs in the sound booth, so the carpeting will be replaced there as well. Margot, I think we've got your agendas and so forth up there. Grab a seat. I'm sorry we had to move all of them out. I didn't know if you were going to make it tonight. And now all this should wrap up by May 10th is what's anticipated. So this should be completed in advance of the events. For example, the Senior Awards Night, we should be able to host it in the renovated theater. Wanted to mention yesterday, Mr. Seymour, Mr. Channel, Mr. Craig Jennings and I traveled to Charleston, West Virginia to appear before the WVSSAC Review Board to appeal the board's, the WVSSAC Board's decision to deny Preston High School's classification in select sports over the next 4 years from Quad A to AAA. There were 9 other schools who had filed similar appeals, and we're also appearing before the review board this week. We were told yesterday we should anticipate a ruling on this matter, most likely this week after they hear all the proposals today. I felt like and Mr. Seymour, I felt like we were able to really, articulate and communicate our concerns. Specifically, we had concerns about travel, or in terms of travel times, our enrollment numbers, our socioeconomic factors that were used to determine the classification. So, we're very hopeful for a favorable decision, but we'll just have to wait out and see this week. Mr. Huggins, that's all I have at this time for the board's, for my report.
Any questions for Mr. Martin?
Is there still a Lady of Ag?
Yes, I believe so. I don't know that that's been named yet, but I believe they still have the Lady of Ag
I couldn't
competition.
remember if it went down during the same pageant time or if it was on a different time.
I'll have to check on that, but I believe they still enact that. Or
I have no idea.
That's done through the 4-H, the
extension.
The people, Galloway's, Spikers, they do their own program.
Okay, I didn't know. It just was always done. Thank you. One quick comment, Mr. Martin, if you don't mind. We also had a forum at the high school for all the candidates.
Oh, that's a good point.
And the reason I want to, and she walked in, I was going to because I didn't think she was coming. I want to congratulate our student board member, Miss Margot Sabone. What a great job you did monitoring and doing it. I got tickled because when the time was up, it was up. And now I wasn't there. I was watching it, and that's the way it's supposed to be done. And I want to congratulate you, also Coach Tennant and Miss Barker for working in conjunction with everybody. Mr. Seymour, again, thank you, the administrative staff, because I'm sure it also was approved, and also you had a hand in it. But what a great community event that was, and I think the students really need to be congratulated. And the other, just a quick comment on the SSAC, for those that went, I thank you. No matter what happens, the decision, at least people know that you went to support our kids.
Thank
And ultimately, that's the bottom line. And whatever the decision is, needless to say, we live with it, but it's appreciated the fact that, and also Mr. Jennings, who's not here, I thank you out to him as well. Mr. Channel's not here, so I'll thank him. I just wanted to do that real quickly because, especially with the forum.
Thank you, Mr. Huggins. And
what-
I did want to call, Alex Burns served as the timekeeper for that event. And there were a number of PHS students on hand to help with the event and tear down, set up. So it was really a well-run, well-organized event. I thought the school collectively did a great job with that.
And the reason I did was because of our board member.
Absolutely.
And Alex did as well. He is the timekeeper. Again, thank you, and we'll move on. Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the service personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Zegray. Any questions or discussions? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. I'll do that here in a moment. Motion passes 5-0. Mr. Evans, would you avail me with just a second on that?
Yes, sir.
Just to double back to the superintendent's update, I also did want to indicate our next board meeting is scheduled for May 13th. I'm anticipating at least a 9 a.m. start. I know that I will likely have a hearing on hand at that point. I also would request that the student government, there's a matter with student government that I believe warrants the board's review. And I'd like to schedule that at 3:30 to allow participation for some of the teachers involved with that organization and some students who might want to appear at the meeting. So if that meeting if it doesn't run to that time, we would need to have a brief intermission, Mr. Huggins, if that's agreeable to the board.
Okay, and we can come back to that at the end, but that way people can be thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. President, I need to recuse myself for the next item on the agenda due to a personal conflict.
Yes, sir.
Let me make that.
So when you get out of sight and sound, I'll progress. Okay, at this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the professional agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Zegray, second by Mr. Tatham. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open.
Ms. Marco, since you're there, can you wait till he announces, please? Thank you. Okay.
Okay, motion passes 4-0 with Board Member Kisner not present at the time of the vote.
Next, I entertain a motion for the board to approve the MOU between Preston County Schools and West Virginia University, West Virginia Public Education Collaborative for the West Virginia Teachers Ascend Partnership.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Zegray. Any discussion?
Mr. Huggins, I just wanted to reiterate, this was in conjunction with the March 25th presentation by Dr. Nathan Sorber from WVU. This is a program in which we could potentially use to attract out-of-state teaching candidates. The MOU is calling for a potential of a total of 10 educators to be potentially hired through this process collectively between both Preston County and Mon. So it's 10 that's split between the two counties.
Okay, thank you. Call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next, I entertain a motion of consent by the board to approve the one-year extension of the 23-24 RFP to the HPS Purchasing Group and continued district involvement in the Mountaineer Highlands Cooperative for the 24-25 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatham. Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Martin, I mean, this just asked for an extension. I don't know that I recall seeing this one in the past.
There had, Mrs. Durr just asked me to put it on the board's review. If you read through the letter, they just indicated typically county boards have placed on the agenda, on the consent agenda. So I felt it prudent to go ahead and do that.
Yeah. Has there been any downside? I mean, like, are we forced to buy something because we're part of the group, or do they take, I mean, I assume it's a buy group, like, so like they say we need apples. And
No.
they put out a bid, and since we have a much larger order, we get the benefits of the cost reduction to
Miss-
a bigger order.
Yeah, Mrs. Durr has not really expressed any significant drawback from our association. If anything, it's been advantageous in our purchasing.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say that we did get a copy of it back when we had our first, the 8200 policy, when we put all those contracts through.
It probably was
I think it
inclusive in
was
that.
included in
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And there was like, there's A through G or something like that. We had all those.
I still have the folder in my office. We like to pull it
I
out.
want to say there was a copy of it in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I remember that. You said that. Okay, anything else? Hear nothing, call for the vote.
Hold on. Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda is discussion information about student board members. Mr. Tatham.
Yep. I think it would be good to have, I don't know, overlapping terms, if you will, if the student board members were agreeable, that it'd be instead of a 1-year term, but it'd be a 2-year term, so that you always have a more experienced member who's been on the board for 2 years, training a new person coming in. I know for me personally, I've seen the benefits of our 2 board members this year of adding a lot of depth and information to it, so that if we had it switched, but I mean, that would require, a commitment if Mr. Manco is interested in doing that for another year, and then another student, so that we always have somebody kind of training the trainer type of a thing, so that we don't lose time in the beginning of the year until the board members understand what's going on. That was a thought.
And board members, I would say, I included the application that is typically, that we've utilized for that program. It just indicating we were actively seeking at least 2 11th grade or 2 11th or 12th grade students. What that would ultimately require, if this is something that's the will of the board in terms of what Mr. Tatham had proposed, we would just need to tweak to indicate we are seeking one, well, in this instance, we would be seeking 1 11th grade member, so.
But we'd communicate too that it's a 2-year, obviously if they can't make the 2-year commitment,
Correct.
then they
Correct.
get out, but that it's a 2-year commitment. And from our board members, I know this is a big time commitment for you all. Do you think that that's something that students would be able or willing to do, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I would have started last year, I would have continued to do so. And it's also important that as you get older, it's nice to have the 2 different perspectives of a junior and a senior. So this is a way to kind of ensure that there's at least one junior, at least one senior. But there's also the thing that we don't necessarily need to change the rules if Colson just puts an application again and then is again chosen. Because you do run into the issue of someone is chosen as a junior and may not do as well. But then they're stuck. We have to keep them as a senior. Whereas now we can say you're a junior, you did a great job your junior year, throw an application. You were great last year, you're great this year, go ahead on.
I would just say another example of how I appreciate the input of what we have. I think that's a very valid point of it keeps our options open.
Absolutely.
Very well said.
Mr. Mako, what do you think?
If this is something at the board, I'd be more than happy. Minus Mr. Huggins and Ms. Feathers for leaving me. Mr. Kisner.
For Mr. Kisner. That's good. See, that already tells you how far you guys have come along. Everybody picks on Mr. Kisner. I love it. So anyhow, I think, again, Mr. Tatham, I think that's a valid point. They've brought a great deal of insight. And Ms. Feathers, kudos, I believe you're the ones that wanted it to begin with. And I think it is a great program. So I think listening to what's been stated, Mr. Martin, if the application would be for a 2-year commitment, but they do have to reapply, and if they want. In other words, they could do it 2 years. You'll just have to word it so they can do it 2 years.
Well, another manner is, for example, in the developed rubric that you're assessing candidates, you could give some level of point valuation for a previous experience as a student board member. That might be a manner that it would be advantageous for a candidate such as Mr. Manco, because he would point out on that particular measure. So that might be something that could be looked at as well. I mean, you want me to just try to pull some options together by the
Mr.
next
Seymour,
meeting?
since we're talking and you are the principal, do you have any negatives or positive that you would like to add? I mean, I think you're here at these meetings. I think it's important to get your input.
I mean, I
yeah.
think what Margot said is important, because you don't always, we may pick one and they may not want to do it again. So I don't think we should try to force them to make a 2-year commitment. But if Colson wants to do it again next year, we already, have his experience. And I think that can be brought up through the rubric in some way.
Okay.
That, so.
Is there-
This is an opportunity, and we may choose 2 seniors next year. We may choose a junior and a senior.
Is there,
I think we should just communicate that there is a chance for reapplication. That should be the biggest thing, that if you are a junior and you do get on, just know that you can continue next year. Because I feel like now, that isn't at all kind of stated, and everyone just assumes you do it 1 year, you stop the next year, because that's what's happened in the past. So just like make sure there's like a thing saying, you can do it again.
disclaimer, yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Is there any way we can do the process at the end of the year instead of waiting until September? Because you're missing a few meetings starting out, and plus we meet in the summer too.
You can, Ms. Feathers,
Start the term.
that's the desire of the board. Now I'll give an example, like Faculty Senate, like code, I'll just use that as a staff example. Faculty Senate says you don't take those votes at the end of the year because of the movement of staff. I mean, theoretically, you could have movement of students as well. But if that's desired by the board, I mean, I can run this however you want to run it.
It gives them more opportunity to be involved, a couple more months.
yeah, because it ends up being about 2 months by the time they get on. So,
Well, and then that also gives an advantage to, I would imagine you can start with the new fiscal year probably in July.
July 1.
But if they know in May that they're gonna be doing this in July, they can be trained and, have some professional development on what's gonna happen, so.
okay.
But rather than, I think it was September or October of last year was their first
Yeah.
meeting, correct? And like you said,
Yeah.
there were how many meetings in for the school year?
Right.
And then, again, until you get acclimated to things, it takes a couple meetings.
So, Mr. Martin, basically, if you would take and listening to everybody, if you would redesign the rubric, for lack of a better description, and maybe bring that back so we can see it, what you're doing. And that way, it appears, I don't think we need a vote. It's not actually as action, it's just discussion. So if you could do that, and then you could include that on a meeting for a vote.
Okay.
Okay? Mr. Seymour, again, as always, we appreciate you being here. That's a good example why. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda is the CIS program update.
Mr. Huggins, I don't have any new information at this time. However, Mrs. Varner has been in consult with Tracy Komorowski, the state CIS, in regards to position totals for next year. So I do anticipate an updated report and hopefully on some of the other matters that were discussed previously on our next agenda, but I do not have any new content at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, I entertain a motion for the board to approve the submitted calendar, option A, for the 24-25 academic year?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatham. Any questions or discussion?
Ms. Martin, I assume you've received, I mean, I know we made an announcement last time and you put out a notice through the all-call and there's been opportunities. Have
One
we had
email,
anything?
yep. In your packets, board members, I did get one email. It's in the attached document. Calendar feedback from, the last name is Kuchera. I included that for the board's review. Did not, last year we got primarily feedback predominantly from staff in regards to a couple of significant professional meetings. Both the math and science teachers have substantial professional meetings. This calendar option, I believe, actually takes care of both of those conferences in regards to that it's either a professional meeting day or a non-school day where staff could potentially participate that and it wouldn't require substantial sub-requirements. So, but in general, this calendar very closely resembles our current calendar option with a few changes here and there. I did include from the previous, it was a 10-7 vote of the committee. You can see examples of the information that was put out, both in regards to posting on our website, on our Facebook site. We put calls, texts, and emails out. We also sent correspondence to staff eliciting responses as well. Didn't get a ton, but we certainly gave folks the opportunity for public input.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Mr. Huggins, I am required to report out our selected calendar by, I believe it's May 5th is the deadline. So I'll have to include, obviously, the documentation from the multiple hearings. This is considered hearing number 2. Hearing number 1 was held back on April 8th. We also will have to submit our what I call our brain freeze plan as well, but I can't think of what that's called, but all of those plans have to be concurrently submitted. So I'll include the board on any correspondence sent to the State Department in that regard.
And then the state board sends back their approval.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question, just since you mentioned it? And I know I've mentioned this to you before, but can we please change that brain freeze name to just Virtual Education Day or
Okay, we can look at that.
something like that? That brain freeze, just
Understood.
That's what you get when you eat ice cream.
with,
That's what you get when you eat ice cream.
yeah, when you get ice cream. But I think it kind of implies that it's a day off to me, that name. But that's just my personal opinion.
We can go, like I said, the day has a specific code-based reference. So I can look at that.
Whatever that process is, and if that's a whole nother agenda item.
Okay.
I will bet you Mr. Bone and Mr. Manco can come up with a fun term that actually is like learn from home or something that is to your point, Mr. Tatham.
Well, maybe we can do some survey work to look at the naming of that.
Different counties have different things, and some of them don't call it anything except.
Some of them send paper packets.
Yep, that is correct. Okay, moving on. There's no educational leave. Out-of-state field trips. At this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the following West Preston out-of-school field trips. They are to Fort Necessity, Washington, D.C., Carnegie, PNC Park, and to the Pittsburgh Zoo.
And Mr. Huggins, one thing I'll update is, I know on the allocation totals for the levy, West have been carrying a pretty heavy allocation on trips. Of course, you can see a lot of those haven't been encumbered yet. The next time you'll see that report, that'll impact West's overall value on their trips, that they're getting those all planned at this point.
Okay. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Zigray. Any other questions or discussion?
I'd just like to say that 4 out of the 5 are levy-funded trips and very educational, I might add. And I'm going to assume that there was a disclaimer on the permission slip that said, this is levy-funded.
I put it out at the last principals meeting, so I hope that's the case.
We need to make sure that is done, because
Okay.
that is one of the simplest educational, like, we can just advertise right there. It comes right to the parent, they have to sign it. Please, it's imperative that that's done. And I'm not saying it's not. If it is, thank you.
Okay.
If it's not, do it.
Gotcha. I hear you.
He's already gave a directive, so.
I understand.
I said, we didn't give, you already did, since you told me.
Could you clarify, you were not direct enough for me, please?
Okay. Any other comments?
It's gonna get worse.
Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda, entertain a motion for the board to approve the attached chaperone list for Fellows,ville, Rollsburg, and West Preston schools.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open.
Boring you, Jacob? Are we boring?
She's
Long
trying,
day,
she's trying to
Jacob.
pick on you because of that picture. So it's going to get.
I should be at 50.
Can I have to just talk about something while we're voting?
Sure,
on it?
motion passes 5-0.
I like how Rollsburg on their chaperone list has columns for checked against the registry and pass registry check. I think that should be almost a standardized format so that it forces the schools to document that they've made the check as opposed to assuming it.
Okay, we can get that certainly sent out to all the schools and ask for that one to be used moving forward.
Okay,
Don't ask, just tell them. Just kidding.
moving on. Next, entertain a motion for the board to approve the submitted out-of-state professional meetings. Jody Bell, Elisa Sines, and Amanda McCleary with 13 students to Houston, Texas on June 24th through 30th of 2024 for the HOSA HOSA International Leadership Conference.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Mr. Zigray. In the recommendation.
I got you. Hold on.
Just changing the wording in there.
Gotcha.
The wording's right, but it wasn't on ours. Okay, I've lost trace. Who motioned in second?
I believe I motioned it.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Mr. Zigray. Any questions or discussion?
I just have one question, just for curiosity. How is this funded? It doesn't have a funding source?
Partially funded by, hold on, I think it did actually indicate there somewhere. Give me 1 second, Mr. Tatham. Some of that is actually going to be from their HOSA account. Covered by students in the HOSA school account.
They do a fundraiser.
Yeah, it's
They fundraise all of that?
Well, the last sentence says vehicle rental will either be charged.
CTE is going to pick up what they can permissibly pick up there.
From my understanding of it, some of it will be paid through a fundraiser, and then the rest will be paid out of pocket per student.
Would something like that, I mean, for the future, if the levy passes, would that be levy eligible?
If
or
Preston will allocate for that specifically, they could take a portion, that could be a portion of that.
and at least in kind or something like that? I mean,
Well, for
small-
example, I think the students that went to the Preston County at the legislature day, I believe, and that was basically one hotel room, so it was a limited amount of funding, but that's something that the high school would have to budget for in conjunction with those programs.
Okay. Yeah, if the levy's renewed, I think we should be doing some portion.
Maybe we could look, and that could be something that would be discussed, Mr. Seymour, obviously with your team, to look at maybe what type of percentage might, be eligible for a trip of that nature.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
And thank the advisors for going. That's a great experience for those students.
Sure.
So anyhow, next is an informational only ongoing literacy.
Yeah, Mr. Huggins, Mrs. McDonald reported out that schools are currently administering their final benchmark of the year. Definitely should have more actual testing and data available by the May 13th meeting. At this point, because all schools haven't tested, we don't have that data available quite yet. There is a debate in regards to whether we will use 3 or 4 benchmark assessments, trying to take feedback from teachers as to one thing that's been said is that we're assessing an awful lot. So that is definitely going to be a consideration for next year, is maybe going to a 3 benchmark versus 4.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that that's being considered.
Yep.
And it's also being done as a team, the teachers. So. Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Next on the agenda is the contract review as per 8200, policy 8200. Entertain a motion for the board to approve supplied contracts with the Center for Model Schools for 24-25 academic year.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatham, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion?
I'll just say I emailed a couple questions to Ms. McDonald, and I was very happy that she responded to me in a timely manner. It was a well-organized, very thorough response. And even after I asked follow-up questions, after I went back and reread it myself, I agreed with her answer. So I just appreciate her response and the thoroughness in it.
Certainly, and I appreciate that as well. I think she definitely makes a conscious effort to try to respond in a timely and thorough manner. But board members, I did approve, or I did supply you with that discussion, and I thought that may be potentially helpful to you in your determinations on this. Mr. Kisner had also asked for just brief breakdowns on each of the contracts as well for the board's review. And then I also included in the last page the sole source document that had been provided by HMH.
Okay, anything else? Okay, hearing nothing, call for the vote.
Voting is open. You just want me to put not present vote? Okay. Motion passes 4-0 with 1 member, Mr. Zigray, not present at the time of vote.
Next is an informational report of levy expenditures. Try that one more time. A report of levy expenditures approved at the 4/8/24 meeting of the board is posted in the public files section. So that is the levy checks. Any questions for Mr. Martin on those? Okay, moving on. Next is also informational financial year 24 school allocation balances. Mr. Martin, anything?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is any of the schools in deficit, several of those issues have since been resolved in regards to either they have canceled out orders or they have made payments to the county office for any differential on some of those amounts. So just wanted to put that out there. And again, the large quantity for West in terms of trips, that'll be reflected when those trips are reflected, when they encumber those funds. We'll see a substantial change on our next report.
Is Preston High School 7,000, is that just for spring sports that haven't been encumbered yet?
We still have a number of buses that we use for spring sports, and we probably have another couple of field trips yet to go, so.
Thank you. Is that the same situation with Preston High School levy instructional supply?
No. That's just money you guys can figure out how you want to spend it. Because I asked if we can use that money, and evidently the deadline has passed.
What does that mean? I mean, it's $2,800 that.
In that instance, it would be carried over, if it's either carried over directly to the school or it would be spread amongst instruction. It has to stay in that category. So it would be utilized in a collective pot within instructional supplies for the other schools.
So, down at the bottom, it says purchase order submissions are due February 2nd, so since it wasn't spent by then?
That is correct. It wasn't encumbered by then, not spent, it wasn't encumbered by then. I thought I did encumber the money, but evidently I didn't.
Is that for supplies that are needed still for this school year? Are we holding,
To be honest,
yeah. So it's,
I mean, what I would have done with that money is I probably would have bought paper for next year. That's, because we spent all the money we needed for this year, so we had X amount of dollars left over. I thought I had encumbered it and put the PO out, evidently I did not. So, and that's kind of what we do at the end, that's when we come up in January, Ms. Sabatino and I kind of look and see where we're at, and then we kind of plan for next year.
Is there any wiggle room for that? Because, I mean, you never know.
And we can always discuss, I can discuss with Mrs. Kerstetter
I mean,
as
I-
to whether we can do anything on that matter.
I emailed her this week about that, and she said,
but you guys knew the deadline well enough in advance?
we knew the deadline, and I thought that I had encumbered it, but so we knew the deadline, because last year was even worse, to be honest with you. If you look at last year, we left probably $10,000 on the table. So I made sure this year that we spent our levy money. I thought I did, but evidently I didn't.
But again, any carryover will be retained within that classification of dollars. It has to remain within
Was the
instructional
10
supplies.
No, the 10 was not rolled over.
Was not rolled over to you. It was spread around the county.
Correct.
It goes back to
Although
Jim.
I will say this, I overspent in my, you can see, I overspent in my levy activities.
Can't do it, though.
Last year, prior to the deficit, but that did roll over to this year.
Right, right.
So, the 10,000 we didn't spend didn't get rolled over, but the 11,000 we overspent did.
So I guess,
The idea behind that, though, would be is if a school didn't spend it, that it could be collectively provided to the other schools, and the fact that it wasn't needed there,
Yeah.
it could be collectively spent at the schools that did use their allocation.
I mean, that makes sense if it's not needed.
That's,
then-
I think that's the mindset behind that decision.
well, to an extent, but I mean, who's making the determination as to whether or not it gets rolled over to the same school or across the county?
I mean, Mrs. Kerstetter had communicated that at the principals in July, I believe. So it was a known, or the principal's
Yeah.
academy there at Capen.
Internal.
Yeah. I mean, like, when that happens at a state or a federal level, that's
Let me ask, that's a good question.
a little bit different than at a local level.
I mean, the board
I guess I would just
say, hey,
articulate
that's what the
that, I
state
mean, if you have some influence on that, if a school has a purpose for rolling it over to the next year, I think that should be taken.
I think that's something we do need to discuss. If
Yeah.
there's a purposeful reason to hold back a certain amount of funding that you're trying to build up for some type of major expenditure,
Yeah.
I think that could certainly be
Yeah.
discussed.
I mean, again, I encourage I don't have any federal legislators on my phone, but our state ones, to stop the use it or lose it. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, it results in a lot of waste, of governmental waste, because
Sure.
if you know that if you don't spend it, you'll lose it, and you'll get less allocation the next year, it results in frivolous spending, in my experience. So all I'm saying is, if you have some influence or a part of a discussion, Mr. Martin, I mean, I would encourage, I understand it stays in the same
Category.
in the same category. That's law. That has to stay. But I do think
Correct.
that there should be some, if the school says, yes, this would be beneficial or useful, or we have a plan for that in the following year, like, we want to do a big thing, but we need more money the next year than what we're getting allocated. I
Right.
think that should definitely be taken into consideration from my personal perspective.
Okay, I think we can certainly have that discussion with our finance department and with our schools.
So like, it says here, what is it, February 2nd is the deadline? So what happens if we have a huge rain like we did before and like a bunch of stuff gets ruined because, sometimes it comes through, but they can't use that $2,800 from work, like how does that?
I think we would have to make exceptions under circumstances as you described, sure.
Like if there was some type of thing like that?
Sure.
Okay, I was wondering like how, like,
No,
set.
that makes sense.
I would be interested to know why it's so early. I mean, that's just, It's like
We're
reading the
liquidating the
future.
hundreds of transactions, though, and to make sure that we have all this closed out. I mean, I think that contributes to a certain extent.
I think from conversations that I have had, when we were talking about this from last year, I mean, again, ultimately, the finance office here is trying to make sure that we don't go over and that it is properly used in its allocated area, and they do need time for that in that reconciliation. So I mean, February, I think at that time, I had also pointed out that seemed very early to me. I mean, just in some of the.
I think that's a conversation we need to
But I
continue
do,
to have.
again, there's a lot that they're managing there, so I understand a little bit. I mean, again, it has to be encumbered, not necessarily spent.
Correct.
So it's just them asking to make sure that they have an idea of what it's gonna be used for. Again, I'm not saying, I thought it was a little bit early personally. I'm not saying it's completely reasonable, but I do know that there was thought put into it as far as in the discussions that I had last year.
So what if you encumber it, something else comes up, can you change what you use it for?
So when you encumber,
Cancel the PO.
what you do is you open a PO. You have to open a PO to encumber the money. So if something comes up, the PO wasn't opened by February 2nd, we'd have to get an exception. If something major happened, we'd have to get an exception.
But I think what Ms. Feather's asking, if it was, let's say you had a PO and something came up,
Yeah,
can
you
that be
encumber it
changed?
for,
If you haven't executed the purchase order yet, you could potentially change it.
Right, it depends on how you worded the PO, what the PO was for.
So basically-
We open POs all the time in the high school, say for instance, for animal processing, we'll open a $5,000 PO. Now, we'll pay out of that PO maybe 3 or 4 times. We'll buy 2,000 something of this, 1,500 of that, and 1,500 of that. So that's how that $5,000 PO. So it's not like you have to spend it all at that one shot. And we open it up as a general PO.
Sure.
We don't say we're gonna buy 10 pigs. We'll say it's for livestock or something like that.
Supply, like a lot of times you'll see too, they categorize instructional supplies.
so basically you could open all of your POs in August and change them anyway.
You'd have to know what
You still
you'd
have to-
Still have to know what you're wanting.
You can't open a PO, just say I'm gonna buy whatever. You'd have to have some level
But I mean,
of detail.
What you're saying is, what you're asking is, could I have opened a PO in August for $24,265.06 for instructional supplies? I think the answer to that is gonna be no.
It is.
okay, so,
They're gonna want us to be more specific. That's just my take on my conversations with Mrs. Kerstetter.
They better,
I
they
think
better
we-
require that.
I think we as a board would want that too, because.
Or you'll have a
it-
different problem.
It could open up, yeah, a huge problem. And it is tough. That date, it is tough. And I'll use as an example, going off this, is athletics. As an example, with times the purchase orders, like Mr. Kisner said today, they have to have time to do it and figure it out.
Well,
Okay.
and to be honest, like, I kind of budgeted each department a certain amount. Now, if they, I don't know if they could have opened a PO, that's a conversation I could have had with Mrs. Kerstetter, I guess. So, but honestly, in like December 1, I said, I need to know what you want to spend on your instructional supply money on by December, whatever it was, that they had to leave December 22nd, whatever the last day was. So, some people gave me information, others didn't. At that point, I thought I knew how much money I had left. And I went to Ms. Sabatino and said, okay, we need to make a PO, and I want you to make it for paper, for this, so that we do spend our money this year. So, but evidently we didn't open it for a large enough amount.
Okay? Anything else?
I just would like to thank the administration again for providing this report. I think this is another example. By providing this report, it allows us to learn as we go. We're never going to be perfect, but it allows us to make modifications and educate our employees and let everyone know what's going on. So again, thank you.
And you do a principals meeting every month, right?
This report is pulled from, so I pulled this from the principals meeting agenda. That's always
Yeah.
supplied at our monthly meeting.
Yeah. So I'm saying like that January, like as a principal, that January meeting, I'm sure is when they're looking and trying to get those amounts to make sure,
Yep.
hey, I've got, you. I mean, even if it's the last
We
day of the
definitely
month,
had
you
those
got 2
discussions,
days,
yep.
which- Yeah.
But I'm,
We were reminded in January.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just specifically saying by putting it on the board agenda, we allows us to be in loop and the public
Yeah.
so that it's no one's surprised.
No, and I know from the finance office, this was a major report, like for them, there's a lot of effort that goes into.
There's a lot,
this. I
yeah,
mean,
it's not one they can just kick out.
Right, right.
Like,
So
they can't hit
certainly-
2 buttons and print this off.
But it's well worth the effort.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Okay, moving on. At this time, next on the agenda is the proposed coach incentive adjustment. At this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the modified language from the approved postseason coaching incentive pay that is included in the public file section of this agenda item.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Zigray, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda is informational monthly financial report. Mr. Martin.
Mrs. Kerstetter just supplies this for the board's review. If you have any questions, I'll certainly try to answer anything. We're certainly passing along any questions to her to get a response.
Okay, hearing none, move on. If you see something later on, let Mr. Martin know to
Okay.
send him an email, he'll get the information. Next is an informational as well. It is bank reconciliation example. Mr. Martin.
Yeah, this, in our discussions with the auditor, I know, Mr. Kisner, I think you had made a request for just an example of a typical reconciliation. So this is actually supplied in the executive content due to the fact it's got account numbers and so forth on it. But for the board's review, just to see the typical reconciliation process on a given month, that was for, listed for Aurora School. So that was just available for the board's review.
Okay.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, this is suggested as a typical, like, I mean, like this was not listed as something, I would have expected based on the school that it would have been a smaller one, but this was from finance's perspective, they felt like this was a normal, typical amount of activity.
Yeah, and I mean, it was, like I said, that for a small school, you can see there's still quite a bit involved.
Yeah. At some point, I'll probably try to get with Ms. Kirster. I'd like to see what the system looks like on the school side.
Okay.
Like,
The school cash side.
Right, that's really your, from my perspective, like, that's where your clog is, whether that system's friendly or non-friendly. In that, I mean, like, 50 transactions is not a huge amount of transactions a month.
Right.
As far as that side goes. But again, it really depends on what that system, but again, that's just something at a future date I'd probably like to see on her side.
Okay.
What it looks, like what our interface and all that acts and looks like.
Okay. I'm sure we can make that arrangement if needed.
And that kind of ties into our next one, going into, which is discussion, information, and review of the county and school level fiscal audits from the 22-23 school year. I'll turn it originally to Mr. Martin. Just quickly, Mr. Kisner and myself also attended it. So I'll let Mr. Martin to start with, then go to Mr. Kisner for additional comments if he has any.
Sure, Mr. Huggins. So we had a conference with the auditor. It was you, myself, Mrs. Kerstetter, and then Mr. Kisner was able to participate virtually. During that discussion, I mean, I think generally speaking, the audit findings were very positive in nature. We do have one finding that has been a persistent finding is segregation of duties primarily at the school level. That appears on most, if not all, of the stated reports. There are issues at times where, for example, and we have to continue to work to ensure that purchase orders, for example, are established in advance of any acquisition. Making sure, a problem that we really need to work with our vendors that I think leads to a lot of potential findings is a vendor will send us they'll put on it an invoice, okay, in advance. They'll say, this is what this service or whatever is going to cost. And they will put on it invoice. What they need to be sending is quote, okay? A quote can then be used to formulate a requisition, which then is used to determine or to create a purchase order. I think there have been many instances where we have utilized, they send us what is stated as I want to say it wrong, as an invoice, and that has been utilized to create the purchase order. And if you were just looking at that from the perspective of, from an auditor standpoint, they're saying the purchase order was established after the invoice, which isn't necessarily the case, but from an auditor's eye, it can certainly appear to be the case. I do think that has contributed to some of those findings related to that in particular. I think that is an occurrence that we have to continue to tell our administrators. If the vendor sends us to you and it says invoice, tell them, no, you need to send me a quote rather than the invoice. I think that would help to alleviate that ongoing issue. One thing that is required in the compliance letter that was sent to Mr. Huggins is that we make sure that we, to supply and make public the results of our school level and county audit, which all of those are available in the public section here for review. We've also asked the schools to provide a brief plan of how they may try to address the issues that were stipulated in their school-based audits as well. Obviously, we're going to have to look at some, and Mr. Kisner and Mr. Huggins may be able to speak to this. The one, we asked the auditor, like, what is going to be the best way to, for example, segregation of duties, what is the best way to get that off of our audits? Because, in talking with our auditor, that is a common finding, unfortunately, for school districts, small municipalities. It is a pretty common finding, but obviously we don't want findings on our audits. We want to find ways. There are, the schools that have multiple secretarial staff or staffing that could be potentially designated to take on certain fiscal tasks. That would help. Some of our smaller buildings, it is more difficult. There might have to be one thing that could be done is, again, some type of county level position that is specific to, again, monthly reconciliations or taking on some of the school-based fiscal tasks at the county level to potentially handle that. What has to be determined is a position cost. Is it worth it related to the finding? I think that's what I kind of took from that conversation with the auditor, but I would open to Mr. Huggins or Mr. Kisner for additional feedback from our meeting.
Mr. Kisner, I'll go first and then let you go because you asked a couple questions with that. One of the things, and I wrote down his first name, I don't remember his last name. We called him Mr. Eric, so we'll go.
Mr. Swagger, I believe so.
Okay. With him, almost every county in the state has the same findings that are small. That was with the schools. That was one thing he pointed out. He did say that he would check with, there was one school district, Mr. Kisner, I believe, asked him, was there any place?
Wood County.
And it was, there was a
Wood
county,
County.
Wood County.
I believe it was Wood County.
We think that had it, and he was going to check with them and get back to Ms. Kerstetter. And then the other thing he said he was going to do as well, one of the things with this is with the state school board, the way it's set up, and ask them for suggestions because this is part of it, it's part of the government accounting. And so some of that is you have no choice about the way I took it. And so he said he would ask the state board for suggestions. And one of the things that Mr. Martin referenced was the possibility of a professional at the county office to it, and that goes into the finances part, whether it is important enough financially to do it. So, and the reason I'll go to you, Mr. Kisner, because you have more information, more knowledge of the financial.
Before Mr. Kisner starts, I think one other item that stood out to me is availability of, I guess, quasi-school organizations, booster groups, things of that nature. We are going to continue to have to work to ensure that we have records from those organizations. While they operate with a separate tax ID, they are, not in theory, they are potentially collecting funds on behalf of the schools. So that was an item that also I think is a major item of concern that we need to continue to work towards as well. Those were the two things that I took from it, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Kisner. Of course, he's got a lot more fiscal background than I do. I'm sure he could speak to this as well.
I mean, again, from being at the meeting, ultimately, the consensus from the auditors was the same as last year. For the members of the board and the public, page 106 is really your real results. So if you look at your scan at page 106, auditor's report was unmodified, which is a weird name for past. But ultimately, unmodified just means that we did not have any adverse opinion. We did not have any major issues that we feel like we need to modify our opinion. So it's the best that you can get is an unmodified opinion, is as far as that side goes. They did find material weaknesses. They did not find significant deficiencies. As far as under the financial statements portion, under the federal awards, there was no material weaknesses and no significant deficiencies, and they also had an unmodified report. So again, unmodified is the best that you can get. It's the A on the report card, not 100%, but it's the A on the report card as far as that side goes. Again, he gave the same thing. The governmental standards that they have to do the audit by, again, you got to remember, their audit for us is same as if they go to a small town or municipality and they do an audit, or if they go to a PSC, a PSD, any kind of a government nature. So it's the same kind of rules that they're following. That's what we fall under because we are governmental. So this, their issue as far as the separation of duties is always going to show up. It will surprise me if the state has some ideas. I mean, again, the one idea that I have passed around and we've talked about for the past year or whatever is just the potential of offsetting. If we were to move part of the process from each school to another school in a circular motion so that you were able to segregate one of those steps. The concerns that they have is that the same person who writes the checks is doing the bank reconciliation and the deposits. So that person could report to their principal, hey, we wrote a check for fruit to hand out as an incentive. They then are also the person who sees it come in on the bank rec, and on the bank rec, it could have been written out to themselves. So they could have cashed the check themselves and stolen those funds, but they're the ones handling the check going out. And when somebody would double check that on the bank rec to say, hey, actually this didn't clear for who you said you wrote it to, they also get to double check that. So that's where your weakness is at, is that they could potentially embezzle funds to themselves because they're seeing the check going out and the check coming in on both sides, and only one person is doing that, which is generally our secretary at each one of our schools. Just to give you a low-level example of what their concern is. I also understand Ms. Kerstetter's point. Secretaries are not going to like it. Doing somebody else's reconciliation, because it is somebody else's checks that they may not be as familiar with. And again, it's never going to be equal. One school may have 50 transactions, the next one have 60, and that may be close to the amount of work. But also, if some T isn't crossed or some I isn't dotted, that work goes on to that next person. So it's not without issues as far as the potential idea that I've thrown out. The other thing I understand is there is some software limitations as far as the system that we use.
I think under the scenario you described too, I think one thing the board would have to take into consideration, I think that would most likely result in some level of overtime. Like I think it would require probably some work beyond the instructional day or beyond their existing work hours to maintain that. But I mean, I think there would have to be some level of cost any way we try to attack this particular issue.
But it could be cheaper than hiring a central level staff. So again, that would be the offset to the other idea, which is just having a central level staff. I don't know, again, Mr. Martin and Ms. Varner will know better. If that's something that could be contracted out. Reconciliations are pretty low level work for most accounting firms or CPA firms that you have around, if you can find somebody to take you.
And I've thought of the same processes as maybe looking at contractual work versus, because, again, that would be potentially a less costly manner to try to address the concern.
Yeah. So anyways, those are the things. Keep in mind you have multiple audit reports. The main one that was discussed at the meeting that me and Mr. Huggins were at was the entire system, the entire systems board audit, right? We have smaller audits for each one, we have agreed upon procedures at each one of our schools, which is not an audit. There is no opinion, unmodified or otherwise, because they're not doing an audit. They're not going nearly as extensive. They're doing, agreed upon procedures is literally that. There is a list of procedures that they check to see if they believe that what is going on there is viable and trustworthy and providing some amount of protection for the governmental, quasi-governmental funds. In the case of the PTOs and whatnot, which is where we got the majority of our dings. I believe from what I've looked at, there's been some change in the code. It almost looks like we did worse this year than last year, but I think that's because last year they were kind of given a little bit, from my understanding, they were a little bit more lenient on the you don't have bank recs. Like this year, they're saying they want a financial statement. I can certainly understand why a PTO may have issues with that. Most of these are volunteer groups, and you have a volunteer treasurer that doesn't know anything about putting together a financial statement. They're like, I can reconcile the checkbook, I can make the deposits, and I can write the checks. But a financial statement's a whole different ballgame if they're not, if they don't have access to some kind of software or program or something of that nature. So, you have one of the products that we were provided is the responses from each principal at each one of those schools, trying to figure out how they're going to address it. And I think that was part of it, because I don't remember having those last year. What was that?
I said, I think that the responses from the schools, to my eyes, looks new. I don't remember seeing that before.
I requested those, they submit those.
I think that's a great first step, and I think if you're reviewing the principals, the building administrators on that so that they're held accountable to it, but I think that's the first step in getting them to acknowledge what their shortcomings are and getting on a process to fixing it. And I think furthermore, kind of jumping off what you're saying, Cross, is that if maybe we could set like an example in a good way, like if there's a school that is doing it well, that we showed the other schools, okay, here's how Fellows School does it, or here's how West does their financial statements, so that the booster clubs know that, okay, this is what's expected, and it doesn't have to be impossible or difficult. Here's an example that you can follow, or an Excel sheet that you just plug in your income and list it, and it kind of adds it up for you. It doesn't have to be impossible to do it.
And I think we had a couple really strong school level audits that I think could be, and I would say this, those are probably secretaries that are more tenured, that have been at this, have a lot of experience as well. But certainly, I agree. I think if we can find those schools that are doing things well and try to spread those practices to our buildings that maybe are having some level of struggle.
To me, like, I look at this as being a step in the right direction from where we were a year ago having this conversation, that by seeing the school level responses, that tells me that we are acknowledging it, that we're giving some ownership to it, and we're trying to move, but we need to keep monitoring that we don't see the same issues at the same schools, so that slowly we're getting everyone brought up to what's expected. The second request I would have is back to the overall county level audit. How, besides this meeting, can we communicate to the public that we have an audit that is maybe not exceeding standards, but it is meeting standards, right? If we're using, you said it's not 100%, but it's an A. Can we do the cell phone blast like we did with the calendar, of sending out a link and saying, here's where you can see your audit? Because that's good news that we need to share with our community. That, I mean, a lot of federal funds and state funds have gone through the school system with COVID money, and we passed the audit.
Well, we're required to post our audit, but we certainly can take efforts to be sure that we adequately communicate that.
Yeah, and send a link to it that people can get into it themselves. I mean, because that's how our government works, and people need to take ownership. And
we'll probably do something on the scrolling bar, but I can speak with Mrs. Ryan about getting that out. So.
And I'm sure you already will, but definitely have Ms. Kerstetter review any words you say. The thing about audits is generally they're saying, we're not saying there's no issues, we're saying we didn't find any. So the difficulty and I like your suggestion, but the difficulty is we can't say we came out great, we can't say we came out good. Like, ultimately, it is the report, an audit report is saying we didn't find any issues.
Right, I understand.
That's still a good thing, though.
Which is right. I mean, ultimately. So, anyways, I mean, Ms. Kerstetter, in her law background, she will be much better even than I could be at making sure.
I'll work with her to craft the communication.
Yeah, we'll want to be very careful, because you certainly don't want. It's very hard.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I think we can use it from page 106 that you pointed out, of saying that this is what the findings were,
Yeah.
and give them a link that they can go and review the 111 pages at their leisure.
No, and we do
Because-
that.
We do
My
that,
concern
yeah.
is most people think it, and that's why I kind of started that way out with the board is, most people are looking at it like, well, I just want to know that we did good. Where's the word good? Where's the A? Where's the great? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's the
understand.
difficulty in it, is trying to make them understand it was a positive thing. But, to that extent, I mean, again, I appreciate the principal's responses and understanding. I think that is, like Mr. Tatham said, a good thing. I think that I personally, again, if I could be of assistance, if PTOs would like to, if principals and PTOs thought that it would be useful to have like a work day to go.
We need to do like a
Apparently,
workshop.
there's
No,
a
I agree.
form, right? Like I don't did we put out any notification from central office about, because it appears this form this year, that was not on the ding list last year. So I don't know if it's a new form or if it's being enforced this year, but did we put out anything from central office? Because obviously PTO
Yes.
members would not have been aware. They're not getting a notice like Ms. Kerstetter or central, finance or whatever, like, hey, here's something that has to be filled out every year.
We had communications through our principals meeting in terms of certain communications as expectations for groups. It's been very hard to wrangle those groups. We're continuing
Yeah,
to work.
and I don't want to blame anybody. There just
No,
was
I-
time and time again, there was 3 or 4 of them that said, we were not aware of this form. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that they were made aware or not. I'm not in any way contending that. I was just saying like 3 or 4 of them, that was their innate response. Now, again, I've sat in classes and not paid attention to every word. So, right? I mean, that's certainly.
Right.
So I'm not trying to blame anybody. I was just asking, yes, Mr. Huggins, some of them might have been yours.
That needs to be an absolute point of emphasis. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, one thing that I took from that is a problem that we have to continue to work
Yeah.
towards.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and again, Mr. Martin, Ms. Kerstetter, publicly, great job.
Offers Mrs. Kerstetter, I swear, yes.
And I told her, as you were there when I told her, how much I do appreciate her. And again, Mr. Kisner, I thank you. Sitting in one of those things, it's a whole lot nicer having somebody that works with it. Because somebody that does not work with it, I can say, but not really understand. And between the two of you, Mr. Martin, you brought it down to really I could understand, and Mr. Eric, he did a nice job presenting. So I want to thank everybody publicly, the finance office, what a job they did to get everything. And there are problems, as Mr. Tatham pointed out, we just need to continually work on them. But it's like everything in life, there's things that can be improved, and this is an example. Okay, moving on. Thank you again. At this time, entertain a motion for the board to approve the schedule of checks to be written.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Entertain a motion for the board to approve budget journal entries 149, 150, which has to do with teacher leadership, insurance for the PHS lightning damage on the football field.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mr. Tatham. Any questions or discussion?
Did the insurance cover the entirety, I mean, minus whatever our deductible was?
Yeah, I believe so. It was one of the late standards out there at the football field. I think it did impact the huddle camera as well. Correct, Mr. Seymour?
And that was also able to be fixed and all, that, like, we didn't have to add funds from any other thing.
I don't believe so,
The
no.
journal entry is only going to cover what came in from insurance, so I just didn't know.
No, and I think we're even good on our tech equipment that was out there because it was on a UPS that would have the surge protection.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda is the maintenance work order system update is information. Any questions for Mr. Martin or comments?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Cole.
I just want to say thank you for putting the tiles in. It looks so much better in there. I greatly appreciate it.
I'm awesome at it now. I mean, I can work them in there.
And Mr. Martin did a great deal of that he probably doesn't want stated publicly, but he did on a
Well,
weekend.
it is an improvement for sure. I agree with you, Colson.
And then secondly, I just have a quick question. It's to my understanding that teachers cannot place in work order. Is that true?
No, they should be able to, well, I'll tell you what, they can if the building administrator designates that that's something they want to allow
Yeah, we
for.
don't do that, guys.
Okay.
We asked them to let us know, and then we place it.
A lot
That
of the
never
schools have it
has.
more centralized, that they have someone that they want reporting it out, secretary, principal. I mean, we can open the level of access though based upon what the school desires.
At Preston High, that's been a long-standing tradition. It's always gone through the principal. When I say always, my time era,
Okay.
no matter
yeah.
what it was,
And I
had to.
understand that 100% that, administration and, custodians can put it in. But also, I know, how many daytime custodians do we have for the high school?
2.
2. And then I also feel like admin's very busy and there's a lot of teachers that are constantly out. So I just feel personally, if not, you can take this with a grain of salt if you want. But anyways, I just think that also, teachers are in their own classrooms and, they're also checking the bathrooms between, classes and stuff. And I feel like if they can see something, not, admin I'm sure gets on as fast as possible, but sometimes they get busy. So if we have the chance for teachers to immediately see a problem and put it into the system, maybe we can be more proactive instead of, waiting until the problem becomes to a greater extent.
Does the secretaries do it? When I was, and again, I hate to go back, but when I was there, the secretary could put it in. Instead of necessarily the administrator. I mean, we turned it in, but the secretary was the one who did.
The ones who can put the work orders in at the high school were secretaries and admin.
What is the turnaround time normally between a teacher identifying a
It
problem?
depends on the issue.
She means,
When do we put it
Like,
in?
no, I mean, like, if a teacher, let's say tomorrow, were to see something in the bathroom, like, once again, like a broken wall or door,
Yeah.
and they say, they find a secretary, they tell them, what's normally the turnaround time of that getting something? Like, work order.
We can pull the metrics, Margot, because it's Excel based, so we can see when the order was submitted. We can, if maintenance obviously updates properly when it's completed, you can assess the
I mean,
time.
She wants to
between-
know, when I know,
So a teacher
how
to,
long does it
okay,
take for me
okay.
to submit it? And my answer is 15 seconds. I mean, literally, so tomorrow, Mr. Russell comes to me, or emails me and says, somebody ripped not that this would ever happen, somebody ripped the paper towel dispenser off in the men's bathroom in social studies hallway. And he emails me that, I pull up my maintenance work order thing, put it in, and wait for them to fix it. Now, going back to what Colson said, I can understand their rooms, but if you're talking about common areas, if you allow teachers to do that, who's to say that 3 teachers don't put the same thing in?
Yeah, well, maybe that's a good suggestion, maybe is specific classrooms versus common
And
areas.
here's the other thing with that, I wanna know what's wrong with my building. So as administrators, we wanna know what's wrong. So that's why I asked them to come to me. Most of them send them to me, honestly, and I usually put them in.
I assume Ms. Serbone's question is more, and again, I'm not saying break the process, but if I understood her question, it takes you 15 seconds to enter. But if that email's sent at 8 a.m., you're not sitting at your desk just waiting on work orders to come to you. So I think probably the heart of her question was really like, normally, does most of those get put in within a day?
Oh,
or
yeah.
or
Well, I speak for myself.
Right,
At the end of the day, I want 0 emails in my inbox.
right.
Okay, doesn't always happen, I'll be honest with you, but I usually scan. And if somebody does come in and say that they need a work order, I usually try to get those done, and there's other ones I'll leave behind.
so it's like a day turnaround.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now that puts it in front of a maintenance staff.
Yeah, and not
view.
the
Yeah.
actual maintenance, not
And
just,
honestly,
if we're gonna change the
if
system,
you
is
go
there
through
anything
the
that needs to be
secretary,
fixed?
it's probably quicker.
Yeah, and the problem with The problem with the suggestion of just giving teachers the ability to do it with their room is the current thing that Mr. Sines has put together is just, I mean, there's no way to limit somebody on the areas that they can report it on. It's an awesome thing that he did to make things trackable and easier, but it is pretty primitive as far as, it's essentially a Google form, right? So like, you don't have the ability to limit teachers to only report something about their room or only about their hallway or whatever. Like, it would be much more difficult for him to make that modification.
But we have a program in place now, Qualtrics, that may give us better functionality there. We just have, have not had the opportunity to really dig in on that yet, but.
One of the things in defense of administration, ultimately, sometimes it's a safety issue. And a safety issue needs now. And so as a teacher, if I send it in and the principal doesn't know and something occurred, he's liable. I mean, I am too.
Yeah.
But he's liable because he's the boss. And so from an administration standpoint, I understand why you're doing what you're doing, because that's huge. Some of it's not, with the point that you two are making.
See, the one
But the
thing
safety issue, I think that's huge.
The one thing I would say though, in the current system as a user, when you input a work order, you can stipulate that it sends an email to the administrator. I'm 99% sure you can do that.
Here's the way the current work order system works. At least, now there's two different work orders. There's the technology work order and the maintenance work order.
Right.
So the technology is still the old way. The maintenance work order is, it always comes to the administrator. If you want it to go to somebody else, you have to put that in. So say.
Oh, you're right, Mr. Seymour.
So
I may be
Mr.
thinking
Russell
tech.
Yeah, so if Mr. Russell says, hey, can you put a work order in for me? I need, light bulbs changed out. So I'm gonna put that work order in, but I'm gonna put his name down. Who to contact, because it says who to contact. I put Josh Russell as a contact because that's his room, okay? Now, I'll get a copy of that, and I'll get, when they do complete that work order, I get a copy of that. And I file them all away. I keep all of these. So that's kind of how the work order system works.
I have a suggested work order for your school. You'd like to hear it? On the vocational school, the R is missing in Preston.
I know.
It drives me insane. It says Peston High School.
Well, there's a number of those.
Is the R just gone, or is it on the ground? Is the R gone, do you know? But I'm serious, it's the first thing you see when you come up to our building, our school.
I've never seen it at all, so I'm lost.
I completely forgot until just now because it's a teacher said something. When you're walking in the connector, the left door doesn't lock in the connector. Like, it simply doesn't lock. You can go in
Well,
and out.
we're gonna change that because they're replacing all our exterior doors.
Are they replacing the ones in the connector? as well?
Every exterior door.
Okay, good. Okay, then
There's
never.
77.
64 that lock.
There's 77
Yeah,
outside.
Yeah, 'cause
77.
that
But
one
there's 64 that lock.
Because that one doesn't. Okay, good.
I always count them every year, before graduation, so that the seniors don't try to break in and do all kinds of stuff in my building.
Yeah, and unfortunately, hopefully the new ones will help, because there always have been doors, but yeah, there are seven, and that's what people sometimes forget is the number.
Yeah.
77 doors are a lot of doors for a building,
Yeah.
or a complex, not a building, a complex.
I mean, we are trying to make it more secure by putting these exterior doors on and limiting the number of entry points that actually will be used. There will not be 64 doors anymore.
With exterior hardware.
There's gonna be a lot less,
Yeah.
so,
And that's unfortunately a sign of our times.
it is.
And it's also other school districts. I went down to watch my great niece in a play in Maryland, and some of the same things they're talking, because the buildings were built with glass doors and that kind of stuff. It was the time era. Because I looked at the building, and I said, this was built in the 70s. It looked like Valley Elementary. And my little niece said, how did you know that? You can tell, but it's nationwide. It's not just here that we're dealing with it. Anything else? Again, Mr. Seymour, I do appreciate you being at the meetings. It does help. Student board members, great suggestions again. And it's something that they can look at on the new work orders. It's not necessarily a grain of salt, because that is important. And I don't want you to think, even though I said I agreed with you, but it is important when you bring that. And it's something that they can look at to make the system
I can
better.
talk to Mr. Sines. I don't know what modifications potentially could be made.
That's
but we
what
can
I
take a look.
said. That's something we can look at.
Good.
Anything else before we adjourn? Go ahead.
For the, meeting on the 13th.
That's where I was going.
Well, yeah, will student board members need to come at 9 AM or should we be there around 10?
No, it'll be, the hearing will be early, so.
It's my birthday, so.
Oh, well, happy birthday early.
So you're bringing cake for us to eat with you?
Maybe.
Oh. I couldn't resist. So that's where I was going before we went to anything else. On May 13th, okay, the meeting is at 9. Mr. Martin is asking to then go into recess and then meet again at
For a matter of
3:30.
Yep.
He's saying if we were done early, I can make sure we're not done till 6 so that you're here at 3:30.
And I can make sure you're buying pizza.
I'm hoping there would be a break. that folks
You're bringing
probably
lunch.
like to eat. But the
And dessert.
We would like to have, obviously, staff and student participation with this matter. It's related to PHS student government. So I've spoken with some of the instructors involved, and we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to address the board without restricting on their academic day.
It's not a voting item. Is everybody okay with that? So, Mr. Kisner, you're bringing lunch and birthday cake for our birthday girl. Okay, anything else, all seriousness? Anything else to be added on next agenda?
Yeah, the Pepsi machine needs filled up. There's no Pepsi, there's no Mountain Dew, there's no anything in there. They're all sold out, but they did give me change back.
Okay.
It's been a long day.
I will.
Anything else to be added on the agenda?
I guess they aren't hiring the person.
Anything be added? Okay, hearing nothing, at this time, I will entertain a motion.
Under 2 hours? We can't leave yet.
I'll
It's still daylight.
I will entertain a
My
motion.
husband will
for-
never believe that I was at a board meeting tonight if I go home and it's daylight. I'm gonna need a pass.
Mr. Seymour will be glad to write you a pass before he leaves. At this time, I entertain a motion for adjournment.
Yes.
Need a second.
Make that
Second.
motion.
Mr. Zigray, motion. Ms. Feathers, second. Any discussion?
I feel like I should motion for an executive session.
Hearing none, I will call for the vote.
Voting is open.
I'm in the car for 8 hours.
That is called ignoring.
Mrs. Feathers voted no last time to adjourn.
No, I'm not going to anymore.
What happens if I don't vote till the next one?
I was doing the minutes. I was like, oh, yes. No.
Again, thank you, everybody.
Motion passes 5-0 at, what time is it, Mr. Huggins?
It is 7:50.
In May.
You know, it would be
You know what
fun
I
for
need
3
to
of
do?
us to vote no. But it's not such a lot of work because
Would you be available on
have a
Sundays?
motion in there. Once it fails, it fails.
All Sundays?
In May.
Three-quarters
$1 million. I went to summer job starting in June.
This year,
Yeah.
in this school system.
So that would be like
I know, Mac.
Let me see your picture, Phil, or your
28th.
camera
If you
roll.
wanted to start the 28th,
I asked them,
that's not but if you wanted to work,
All 4 of them are up here.
but if you wanted to work,
We're still on, we're still on.
40 days.
and then let me get your number.
What time would it be on the 28th?
We're still on. Hold on, I gotta get this turned off.
Yes.
Out, because they don't respect that.
It's in there.
When
Is that the Journal or is that the Dominion Post?
No, it's neither one.